As a kid, one of the most important lessons I was taught was learning to put myself into someone else's shoes. The truth is, I never fully understood how powerful this statement was up until a few years ago. But then again, as kids, all we have time to think about is if Santa Claus is coming for Christmas or what superhero we will impersonate in the playground. Let's be honest, who hasn't thought about flying into the sky with a long red cape to save millions of lives as a full-time job? As years went by, reality dimmed our imagination into fantasies. Most of us never really took into account that there is always a certain moral that follows those fantasies. Yes, you might not have the actual Santa Claus, but the magic is still there. The idea of love, giving, and family is still there. You might not have the long red cape or the ability to fly, but what if I told you that you do have the ability to save a life? What if I told you that to save a life, all you had to do is have the will to save it? All you have to do is put yourself into someone else's shoes. A lesson I believe we should be constantly reminded of throughout our lives. The shoes we'll be stepping into here are 14-year-old Blake's. Blake was only 16 days old when he received the gift of life for the second time. When Blake was still an embryo, the doctors told his mom that he'd need a new heart almost immediately. They had detected a heart defect that was 100% fatal. And as days passed, all that Blake's parents could do was watch him get increasingly ill, until the 16th day after his birth, when a call came in announcing the news that they had found a perfect donor for Blake. Someone had empathized with Blake's situation, and now Blake is a strong and happy teenager. So what exactly saved Blake's life? An organ transplant. A taboo up until a few centuries ago, and a scientific mystery up until just a few decades. For those of you who don't know what an organ transplant is, it is a medical procedure in which an organ is removed from one body and set in the body of a recipient in order to replace a damaged or missing organ. People who are in desperate need of a new organ can vary from newborns to elderly, and organ failure can be caused by a series of different genetic, physical issues or a disease that damages the function of that organ. The organs that may be transplanted include the liver, the kidneys, the intestines, the pancreas, the lungs, and the heart. With these organs, donors have the potential to save 7 lives. But in order for the transplant to happen, patients must be left in a waiting list and, depending on their health status, are forced to stay patients for years to a lifetime. There's a key part to organ transplants, and that is the donor. A donor can be anyone with healthy DNA. All you have to do is register yourself as an organ donor. But registering doesn't guarantee anything. Yes, to qualify, you can be any age or gender, but only 3 in 1,000 people die in a way in which their organs can be transplanted. 3 of those 1,000 have the ability to save 7 other lives. Just to be clear, the donor is not alive when transplanting vital organs. When it comes to kidneys, since it is not essential for survival to have 2 kidneys, a person can choose to donate one and still live a relatively normal life. In Caleb's case, he was born with prune belly syndrome, a serious birth defect that led to the failure of his kidneys. For 2 whole years, Caleb was forced to undergo 10 hours of dialysis every day in order to stay alive. His mother, Monica, donated her kidney to her son when he turned 3, and now Caleb is a prospering boy that, thanks to his mother, lives an independent life without having to rely on heavy medical treatments for survival. Both Caleb and Monica remain healthy individuals thanks to Monica's red cape. But as I said before, when it comes to other vital organs, only 7 lives are saved per donor, and only 3 of those 1,000 donors are eligible for transplants. This is because their body must be in a relatively healthy and sustainable stage in order for the organ to be transferred to another. By now you may be wondering how a lesson we would learn as kids comes into all of this. Well, the truth is, organ donation is much more than what people perceive. Putting yourself into someone else's shoes is a metaphor for imagining oneself in the situation of another person. Putting yourself into someone else's shoes includes learning to empathize and learning that there are things bigger than yourself. Organ donation is exactly that. The minute you decide to sign up as a donor, you are deciding to save a life. You are deciding to be the hero to 7 other lives. You're acknowledging that there is something bigger than yourself. We see life after death as something people only imagine. We see saving lives as a job meant only for heroes, when wanting to save a life is all you have to do. Believing in the possibility that you could potentially be saving 7 other people's lives after your passing is all you have to do. Up until a few years ago, in 2016, out of Argentina's 44 million citizens, only 6,490 were signed up as donors. That's less than 1% of Argentina's population. And now, the number of organ donors in Argentina are too many to count, and this is why. About 2 years ago, a campaign was launched by the parents of a girl who was waiting for a transplant. Multiplicate por 7 was the name of that campaign. This campaign started with a simple yet crucial purpose. Little did anyone know that it would lead to an entire community here in Argentina. Justina was a 12-year-old girl like any other who had the misfortune of being born with a congenital heart defect that forced her to take various medications in order to keep her heart at a steady pace. When she turned 12, she was told that she was in need of a heart transplant. And as soon as she was told by her parents and her doctors, she said, "Ayudemos a todos los que podamos." Let's help as many people as we can. Despite her illness, Justina managed to empathize with others in her same situation. She took this circumstance as an opportunity to make something bigger than herself. The campaign, Multiplicate por 7, multiplied by 7, says it all. Multiplicate por 7 went on to spread awareness on the subject of transplants and achieved the passing of a law in Argentina that changed its organ donation system forever. Unfortunately, Justina passed just a few months after the campaign's initial launch. But La Ley Justina, the Justina law, carried her legacy by stating that every citizen of Argentina must be registered as donors unless they request otherwise. This meant that one no longer had to formally declare themselves an organ donor if they wanted to be one, and instead, non-organ donors are now the ones who have to formally state themselves non-donors. This increased the number of transplants in Argentina and set a new record of 1,700 successful transplants in 2018, a record that without a doubt increases every year. Besides increasing the number of donors, this law guarantees the quality of medical care for waiting recipients and provides support to their families. And let's remember, all of this influence had started with a simple phrase. Justina's words managed to encourage hundreds of people to save hundreds more. She put herself into the situation of not only herself, but of those who surrounded her, and caused a chain reaction that led to an unbelievable movement. She put herself into other people's shoes so others could follow her example. Let's follow her example. Be the hero so that no one has to die waiting. Together, ayudemos a todos los que podamos. Thank you.